6 million people killed. Not in a war where both sides had weapons, not in a natural disaster. Killed deliberately, on purpose, with paperwork, with trains, with schedules, by a government that planned it out like a business operation. And it happened in 12 years. Less time than most of you have spent in school. This is episode 4 of Dark and Disturbing History. Not that one evil man existed. Evil men have always existed. The scary part is how many ordinary people helped him. So let's start at the beginning. In the 1920s, Germany was a mess. They had lost World War I. Their economy had completely collapsed. There's actually a famous photo from this time of a woman using piles of German money to light her stove, because the cash was worth less than the wood it would have bought. Prices changed by the hour. People would get paid in the morning and rush to spend the money before lunch, because by evening it would be worth half as much. People were desperate, and desperate people look for someone to blame. A man named Adolf Hitler gave them someone to blame. The Jewish population of Germany, less than 1% of the entire country, became the target. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. Hatred toward Jewish people had existed in Europe for centuries, but he weaponized it. He built an entire political movement around it. And here's the part that genuinely shocked me when I researched it. Hitler was elected. Not through some secret coup. People voted for his party. Millions of ordinary Germans, doctors, teachers, shopkeepers, looked at his message and thought, yes, this makes sense to me. Once in power, things moved fast. 1933, Jewish people were banned from government jobs. 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jewish citizens of their German citizenship entirely. They were no longer considered people under the law. Just think about that phrase for a second. Not considered people under the law. That's the first step, and it's always the first step. You don't go straight to murder, you go to dehumanizing first. You make it official, legal, normal, that one group of people simply doesn't count the same as everyone else. Then came Kristallnacht in November 1938. In one single night, mobs across Germany smashed the windows of Jewish shops, burned synagogues to the ground, and arrested 30,000 Jewish men. The name actually means Night of Broken Glass, and the world watched it happen. Newspapers reported it, and almost nothing changed. By 1941, Hitler's government had a plan. They called it, in their own official documents, the final solution. I want you to think about how cold that phrase is. Final solution. Like they were solving a math problem. Except the solution was the murder of an entire people. They built camps. Auschwitz is the name most people know, but there were dozens of them across Europe. And these weren't hidden bunkers in the middle of nowhere. Auschwitz had a train station, an actual functioning train station with schedules, because the German rail system needed to coordinate the arrival of, on average, several thousand people every single day. When people arrived, there was a selection. Doctors stood on the platform and looked at each person for a few seconds. If you looked strong enough to work, you went one direction. If you were elderly, sick, disabled, or a young child, you went another direction. The second direction led to a building disguised as a shower room. It was a gas chamber. People in the camps were worked to death on almost no food, sometimes fewer than 400 calories a day, while doing hard physical labor in freezing winters. Starvation, disease, and exhaustion killed almost as many people as the gas chambers did. Survivors described looking like walking skeletons by the time the camps were liberated, weighing sometimes less than half their normal body weight. I want to tell you about one specific person now, because numbers like 6 million stop meaning.
Her name was Anne Frank.
She was a teenage girl who hid with her family in a small space above a shop in Amsterdam for 2 years, writing in a diary the entire time. She wrote about boys she liked, about fighting with her sister, about being bored. Completely normal teenage stuff written while hiding for her life. She was eventually discovered, arrested, and died in a concentration camp just weeks before it was liberated. Her diary survived because her father kept it. It's now been read by tens of millions of people. And I think the reason her story hits so hard is that she could have been anyone's daughter. She could have been your friend. That's the point. She wasn't a statistic. She was a 15-year-old girl who liked boys and got annoyed at her sister and had her entire future taken from her. Now here's something that I think is genuinely the most important part of this whole episode. How did so many ordinary people go along with this? And the honest answer, the one that historians keep coming back to, is that most of them weren't monsters. They were just normal people who convinced themselves, one small step at a time, that this was acceptable. A train conductor who told himself he was just driving a train. A clerk who told himself he was just filing paperwork. Evil on this scale doesn't usually look like a monster twirling a mustache. It looks like thousands of people deciding, individually, that looking away was easier than speaking up. There's actually a famous psychological experiment connected to this, done years later by a researcher named Stanley Milgram. He wanted to understand how regular Germans could follow orders to do something so horrific. So he set up an experiment where ordinary American volunteers were told to give increasingly painful electric shocks to another person, just because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. Most of the volunteers kept going, even when they thought they might be seriously hurting someone, simply because an authority figure told them it was fine. I want to end with something simple. 6 million is not just a number. It's 6 million versions of Anne Frank. The most important thing you can do with this knowledge isn't to feel sad for 10 minutes and move on. It's to recognize the pattern when you see it starting somewhere else. That's literally the entire reason Holocaust education exists. This was episode 4 of Dark and Disturbing History.